about 3 months after I'm off, I hit darkness. I mean, suicidal darkness. I had heard stories of people with long-term sobriety, and I had heard stories of people at 20 years killing themselves. And I all of a sudden knew why. I don't want the kind of escape that drinking gives me. I want it to end. And I prayed my ass off, please, 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 I don't want to go back. I do not want to go back. And I made it through, and it hadn't been back since.
Hello and welcome to Psychedelics in Recovery Integration Radio, a safe space where PIR, also known as Persons in Recovery, come and share their experience, strengths and hope with us, with you. My name is Anne. I'm a person in recovery and your host today. Integration Radio is a podcast by Psychedelics in Recovery. The views shared are personal and do not represent PIR as a whole. PIR does not promote, endorse, or sell psychedelics or any substances. This podcast is for reflection and integration only, and is not medical or professional advice. We ask listeners to respect anonymity and the principles of recovery. Please see the safety and ethics page on our website for additional resources, psychedelicsinrecovery.org. This radio is part of PIR's ongoing effort to carry the message of recovery to those still suffering. In alignment with the 12 traditions that guide our fellowship, this program will not be funded by outside contributions. PIR, as an organization, has no opinion on outside issues. While we discuss plant medicine and psychedelics in this episode, PIR does not promote or endorse their use. The spiritual intention of PIR and of this broadcast is to create diverse, safe and sacred spaces for all who wish to recover, always striving for humility over hubris and principles before personalities. Whether you're new to the idea of integrating psychedelics or plant medicine in your recovery process, new to recovery or a long-time member of the fellowship, our aim is to create a space of curiosity, connection, and hope. In this first series, entitled Journeys of Healing, we explore the intersection of recovery and the transformative potential of psychedelic medicine through some of our members' experience. So settle in, open your mind, and let's walk this path together. This is the PIR Integration Radio. And today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Douglas, who has come to share his experience, strengths, hope, and story with us. Hello, Douglas. Thank you very much for being here. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Good. So the format of this podcast is we ask the 5 questions to all our guests. And our first question is, how did you discover and counter psychedelics and PIR? Was that simultaneously? Who came first?
Psychedelics came first. I've been in recovery most of the time since 1986, sober most of the time, alcoholic, a little bit of drugs, but just clean off of a lot of things. I, like a lot of folks, read Michael Pollan's book, got curious. What might they do for me? And so I talked about it with some friends in recovery, with my sponsor. Most people didn't have any real background or any opinion, and I went with some traditional recovery disciplines of no secrets and no self-medication. And I didn't know enough to self-prescribe anything anyway, so I sought out a therapist to help me explore. And after several sessions, we did a journey and started about 3 years ago. And I found it very helpful. 2.5 years ago, an AA sponsee of mine was visiting, he's an artist, and he was an artist in residence at a small town in Washington State, Port Townsend, and was going to an AA meeting at a local recovery club and saw a notice for psychedelics in recovery. So he sent me a note, say, check these people out. So I checked them out, and I've been in the fellowship ever since.
So you said that was 3 years ago. 3
years ago, I started my psychedelic journey, and about 2.5 years ago, summer of 2023, I found PIR.
Do you remember which was your first PIR meeting?
My goodness. It was probably integration on a Sunday night. Big meeting.
And what was your first impression? What went through your head that day when you landed yourself in that first PIR meeting?
I was just infinitely curious because there's so much I don't know. I'm new to psychedelics. But I don't have any of it in my past, in my using or problematic background, is not at all. I grew up in the 70s and 80s when the war on drugs said, one bad acid trip and you could be done for the rest of your life. So I erred on the side of caution and just drank copious amounts of alcohol as far as my checking out journey of problematic usage. I saw a lot of different points of view. Some I recognized. I saw a surprising amount of traditional recovery thought. I saw an interesting cohort of people from 20 to 40 years sober who were trying psychedelics for the first time or for the first time in recovery. So, my people. I saw people who were experienced psychonauts who had a lot of wisdom and experience that I was curious about. And I saw a lot of people dealing with mental health issues. And I've come to identify with those as much as anyone else because my journey has been very much about getting off of antidepressants after 40 years and having an amazing life, an amazing internal life that I have not had because of the attenuation of the emotional experience that SSRIs gives you. So yeah, the people that I saw were varied, and I was interested in all of them. I was just curious about getting to know all these new people.
Right. And so let's backtrack a little bit. And can you tell us about your journey of addiction? And you said you've been in recovery since the 80s. What took you there? What did that recovery look like before psychedelics?
Well, what got me in, I was 18 years old when I got sober. I qualified early, as they say. I've just always been uncomfortable. So when I discovered alcohol and, some mild drugs, just weed and stuff like that, it was nice to check out and deal with my emotional craziness. But it was problematic and I wanted more out of life. Yeah. So yeah, my bottom, I don't have much of a drunkalog. I've been in AA for nearly 4 decades, and some people have really good drunkalogs, really good stories. I don't, just more of the pathetic kind. But it was just bad enough for me to be willing to do the work. And when I got to AA, when I got to recovery, and AA is my primary recovery program, and I found that people had the same inner disturbance that I had, and I found a program that seemed to work, 12 steps. And it was a model that really did work for me. Seeing myself as self-centered and demanding, and that so much of my problems come from what the Buddhists might call attachment, what AA might call self-centered, just self-centered fear, afraid of not being okay, afraid of not getting what I need, and acting out of that fear and getting a bit demandy, get what I think I need, and then being at constant unrest because I'm either not getting it or I get it and it's not sufficient, and just being in constant turmoil. So the program and the disciplines that I learned in AA give me a center to which I can return, or at least aim at progress, not perfection. I think of that saying as being something like, there is the center of a target. And it doesn't mean you don't hit it once in a while. It just means you don't always hit it. But that's where you aim. And when I get off center, I can re-aim. So for me, the constant struggle, there's a saying that I've heard in AA over the years. I turned my will and my life over to the care of my higher power, but I took it back. And that push-pull nature of fear and faith, I trust in my higher power, but I got to get this thing. I think a lot of, I have a joke that describes my internal struggle with trusting. And that is, one day I was driving around, I was running late for a meeting, and I prayed, God, if you find me a parking spot, I will quit all my wicked ways, and I'll straighten up, and I'll do good, and I'll even go to church. And all of a sudden, the heavens part, a ray of light, a ray of sunshine comes down, and a car pulls out of a parking space right in front of where I'm going to go for a meeting. And I look up and I say, never mind, God, I found one. I don't negotiate in good faith.
Yeah.
I mean to. I really do mean to. When I'm in trouble, I really do mean that I will honor my end of the bargain, but it's so hard when I get what I want and I'm good. And that sums up so much of the struggle. I mean, there's all sorts of right action. There's all sort of wise and skillful actions that I can take, and orientations, and just tools in the kit. The struggle for me is using them at the right time. I think a lot of in terms of right relations that we get to later in the steps, in the 8th and 9th step, and then, the daily and the 10th step, but all of that orientation of just right relations with other people, because I have this expectation machine that just keeps generating expectations. Why? Because I'm afraid I'm not going to get what I think I need. And I know better, but still, I just need this one thing. And it's always just this one thing right in front of me. Everything else will be fine. I just need this one thing. And then I'll be okay. And so that inner, I don't want to call it a battle, but it does feel like that sometimes, just the struggle of, am I going to trust, or am I going to demand stuff and then, okay, I'll make amends later. It's really
But all this
tough.
seems very wise and insightful. But I wonder how an 18-year-old would have received that message. It must have been pretty tough, walking into your first AA meeting, age 18, and having to surrender booze and what presumably you associated this with fun, and never mind your will and your life over to the care of a higher power. Can you tell us a little bit more about those teenage years, young adulthood, in a fellowship, presumably surrounded by people much older than you?
Especially back then, I was young. All these old timers had spilled more beer than I ever drank, and all of the sort of
Yeah.
insults of youth in AA.
Yes.
And, there's a whole movement of young people in AA, and, you get to be that for a while. G-O-D, the gift of desperation. All of my sobriety, all of my recovery is based on a simple calculation. I want more than I can get on my own. I want more than I can get drinking. What do you got? I'll do it. So I was just willing. The gift of desperation made me just ask, okay, what do I got to do? And the intellectual, the curious nerd part wanted, loves information and loves to find out how I can be a better version of me. And it's always been there, even when I was a kid. So the rebellious resistance, I guess, was attenuated and satisfied by my not just intellectual curiosity, but the curiosity of how might I go further in life? And I just saw this as a way that I can not just achieve, but be the person that I want to be. And I don't even know who that is, but I have an idea. I have a lot of ideas who I don't want to be. And I am a lot of those ideas. So hence the struggle. Hence the never mind, God, I found a parking space.
Mm-hmm.
Reneging on my negotiations with my higher power.
Right. So fast forward a few years, and you've got decades of recovery and sobriety, but you said earlier you managed to stop SSRIs after 40 years. So what prompted, what came first? What was the notion? Did psychedelics allow you to taper off those? Was that the intention? Tell us a little bit more about what, reading Michael Pollan is one thing, but how did you start putting two and two together and understand that psychedelic could help you with your mental health condition and potentially later your recovery and your sobriety, emotional sobriety, I mean?
Yeah, it didn't necessarily, all of this started with just general curiosity. What might I find out? What might I learn if I have access to deeper depths of me, maybe deeper relationship with a higher power. I still don't know how I think about what happens when I'm on the medicine, whether I'm ingesting entheogens or it just does chemical things to my brain to relax what Dick Schwartz would call my protectors, so that I might have deeper conversations with myself, maybe with God, and maybe with the medicine. I don't know. And I don't really care. My first time was, and as I worked out what my intentions were for my first time with my therapist, what am I doing? I didn't really know. I was just curious. One thing I did know is that there's a hardness to me. I can be cold. And I would like to be warmer to people. So a heart opener was indicated for me. And MDMA was indicated. However, it was contraindicated because I was on SSRIs. So the suggestion was Wachuma, San Pedro, mushrooms. So my therapist gave me a cocktail of Wachuma and mushrooms. This was September of 2022. And it's really kind of funny because those did not work for me. The situation was I would take a dose and then an hour and a half later I'd take a booster. And, I was laying there for an hour and a half just meditating and waiting for it to kick in. And she taps me on the shoulder and says, "Are you ready for your booster?" I said, "Sure, but when does it start?" It didn't have any effect on me. Or no
Visual
visible
effect,
no,
yeah.
not just visual. I mean, I was as sober as you and I are today. There was nothing there. And it was just sort of, So we ended up staying up late talking and doing therapy rather than psychedelic therapy for the evening. And it was nice. But we thought, well, what if I try to get off of SS and come back and try MDMA when it's not contraindicated? So I came back about 6 months later. And in those months, I took 3 months to get off of SSRIs. I'd cut it in half, wait a month, cut it in half, wait a month, cut it, and then off. So it took me 3 months, and this was in work with my doctor. And I'm a big believer in lateral support. My AA community has known about what I do. Not everybody, I don't share it at meeting level, but I'm pretty well. I just got people in my life, all my sponsees, my sponsor, and my close friends, just kind of lateral support. And a few of them had experience with psychedelics, but not many, and none in recovery. And like I mentioned, it was an AA sponsee who found this fellowship for me. But I spent time and very slowly got off of SSR. I was 15 when I got on them, and I was 55 when I got off.
Wow.
I had tried to get off a couple of times in my 20s, just out of an idealistic idea of, being off of all drugs. Man, that was not a good idea. But I did wean down. And January 1st of 2023 is my first day off of them. Makes the math easy. Remember how long it's been. And as I was coming off of them, I was starting to experience a wider sense of self, a wider sense of the emotional experience, what it means to be human. And that was just, I had not had this before. And it was wonderful. This was without any medicine, just, and I was aware, I had a fear that I'm going to hit the darkness. And then as my liver does its thing of kind of washing me out over the following months, about 3 months after I'm off, early April, I hit darkness. I mean, suicidal darkness. I just want this pain. I want it to end. And I had heard stories of people with long-term sobriety. And at this point, I was sober for about 20 years. This time back, I've had a few convincers in the last 40 years, but this time it's been a little over 20 now. And so I'd heard stories of people at 20 years killing themselves. And I all of a sudden knew why. And that is, I don't want the kind of escape that drinking gives me. I want it to end. I don't want to defer it. I don't want to add to my suffering. I want it to end. It hurts. And it's scary. And so, I reached out to friends. I weathered it. And I prayed my ass off, please, 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 please. I don't want to go back. I do not want to go back to that 40 years of no SSRI. And I made it through. And it lasted a few days acutely, maybe a week. And it hadn't been back since. And then a month or so later, early June, 2 months later, early June, I went back and had my first dose where I really felt it.
With MDMA.
With MDMA. And my intentions were, I had an interesting thing. I've had, just like anybody in recovery, you have moments where life is really hard and you have to really work the program harder, or whatever you want to call it. I've had a difficult relationship with my dad all my life. And about 15, 20 years ago, I had a resentment with my dad. It was bad. And a friend of mine said, you look close to a drink. Why don't you try the resentment prayer? And in AA, you pray for the person that you resent. Pray once a day for 30 days if you don't, and don't miss a day. And I'm like, I don't want to pray for that asshole. And he says, well, just write something down. Just write out a prayer of something that you would want for somebody you cared about. I said, I don't mean that. And he said, that's okay. You don't have to mean it. You just have to say it. And writing out a prayer and saying it every day for my father's good for a month, it ended a lifetime of crippling resentment. And it never came back. Fast forward to a couple of years ago, I was judging myself for the same shit that I judged my father for all my life. And, more crippling, just, meh. So I went, and my intention that time was to let that go. I had this hard heart stone that I just wanted to pummel it into dust and just leave it and let it, And the image that I got was, it wasn't dust, it was ice. And instead of crumbling, it evaporated and there was no residue. And my judgment of myself went away. And I had a new compassion. And that compassion is a key thing I haven't had much of in my life, and I haven't really understood. And it's been with me ever since. And oh my God, is that amazing.
And this is something you discovered during your first MDMA journey?
That was my first real journey, as I would call it. The first one where I felt the medicine, all that sort of stuff.
So that full understanding of compassion and what it feels like. And how did you integrate that journey? What does your integration practice in general look like? But particularly this one, since it was the first one and it was such a eye-opener and a heart-opener.
Martin Luther had a really catchy quote. He was one of the reformers back with John Calvin a few hundred years ago during the Reformation. He said, all of life is repentance. And I think all of life is integration.
Mm-hmm.
What am I learning? What am I learning? What am I massaging into my soul? And one just handy question is, how does this apply? How does this apply? How does this apply? How do I apply compassion? Where do I bring this thing to this moment?
And how do you?
I tend to boot from my brain, problematic a lot of the time, just overthinking and all sorts of stuff. But I think at least the remembering of the concept of just bringing and asking the question, how does this apply? It could stay just a mental exercise, but it doesn't really penetrate that deep. So for me, I kind of have to breathe in compassion, and then breathe out compassion, not just in and out, not in the good and out the negative. Breathe in the good and out the good. What does it mean to bring that to this? Not just what does it mean or what does it look like, but then put it in action. Then do it. Then act with compassion. Not just know what it is. And a lot of the times it's compassion to me because, like any good addict, I might not be much, but I sure think about myself a lot. So passion to myself, but also, with the outside world, with the person that I'm frustrated with that's might be standing in front of me. Opportunities to practice. Looking for opportunities to practice. And I think that's the thing, being mindful of what the current thing that I'm integrating, how do I practice that right?
I like that all of life is integration. I absolutely am a believer of this. And it's a daily reprieve, like recovery. Integration is so woven now into my recovery that it's almost indistinguishable one from the other. And it's being fed after each ceremony, after each time I use plant medicine to help me discover a new part of me that was buried or hiding. I know that you're a big fan of IFS. Have you been able to work your practice of IFS better or more in depth through psychedelics? Would you like to talk to us a bit about that?
For probably over a year, but not two, my framework for intention and during the journeys was a family meeting with my parts,
Interesting.
sitting deeply with primarily the protectors, the parts that get me in trouble, the parts that protect me from feeling the pain of my exiles. And the goal of IFS, as I understand it, is to unburden, to live free, unburden from just burdens of that were, these are things that were set early in life and just through life. Trauma sets up structures of reactive exiles that feel pain and protectors that say, no, this is how we will make sure we don't have to feel that pain. And so I've spent time really getting to know my protectors, my managers who are proactive and just get me through life in a way without having to feel pain and avoid fires. And then when they don't quite avoid a fire and a really acute pain shows up because I get triggered, there's this other class of protector called firefighter, and they come in and they spray water everywhere and they do more damage than the little fire that they went to put out. But getting to know those and talking with them, the image and the point was to build trust between myself, my calm, my curious, my compassionate self, and these protectors. The image that I had was, it's Thanksgiving afternoon or Christmas afternoon after, the regular festivities, and you're just sitting around with the kids on the floor playing. Play is probably, it's up there with my most important values, because sitting and playing develops love and it develops trust. So for me, the journey is playing on the floor with my inner critic, with my achiever, with my artist, with my connector, with my parts, and also allowing them to play with each other, the parts that get crossways with each other. I've got a firefighter named Carl. He brings fog. He brings cooling fog when things get too hot. But man, he's my escape artist. He's the addict. He's the one who says we're just checking out, right? And he and the Gus, my critic, really don't trust each other. And for good reason. They're at cross purposes. But to get with them and just play. The idea in IFS is to have them talk to each other and to get to know one another's other positions. And we do that. But we do it when we're on the floor playing. And then the next day, and for the rest of integration, we're in the boardroom talking strategy. How can we better serve this vehicle called Douglas? How can we trust Douglas to maybe make the decisions and not jump in? And it's because of the trust that we build by playing that seems to make it work.
Very interesting. And how regularly do you have those meetings, board meetings or playful meetings with your internal family?
Well, my journeys in the last, let's call it year, have strayed from that model. I have not really, I feel like we've done the work and we have a really good system. But the sense of playing together, on the medicine, because medicine is fun. And oh my God, for a guy that's been sober for most of his life to have fun, that's just weird. And it's fun. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I get to have an augmented reality. And that's a really cool thing. And so there's a lot of play. And that play, everybody values it. Everybody, even the critic. And I do a journey every couple of months. I start to fade. After a couple of months. So instead of an antidepressant pill every day that gives me a narrow bandwidth, I have something every couple of months that it's kind of fun, curious, spooky. I mean, journeys are what they're going to be. Can't control what the journey's going to be. You take care of your mindset, and you get in a good place and all that. Set your intentions. But you're going to do what you're going to do. It's just going to do what you're going to do. But then, sometimes it's boardroom talking to a polarized point of view at any given moment of trigger. How do we want to handle this? How can we handle it better? And then the postmortem of like, how could we have handled that better? And that's the ninth step. How could we have handled? Okay, right, all right. Yeah, I got to call the guy. I don't want to call the guy. It's okay, I got to call the guy. Whatever. But having a sense of humor with these parts that can kind of laugh at ourselves. Strategic meetings, strategic play. I don't know. But it's kind of always and never. So when it comes up, sure, as far as a formal conversation, but they're always there. They're just always there.
Yes, of course. But it's an interesting way of organizing the internal family. So presumably if anyone has any grief or grievances, they all know there is a meeting coming soon that will be addressed.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it.
And knowing that we will address this allows for the trust, because they can trust that we will address this. Because if they can't trust that we'll address this, they're going to grab control, and they call it blending.
Yes, of course. And how does your recovery fit into this? Recovery at large, I mean, recovery from your 40-odd year recovery. How does it fit in? How have psychedelics changed or help improve or strengthen your recovery? Is that the conscious contact with higher power? How has that been an influence?
Step 2 has always been hard for me. I don't understand my higher power. I never did. I put forms around it. I do go to church. I don't know what I believe. I believe I've got a narrative that's sufficient. I believe that it may not be factual. If there is a God, if there's one, if there's, what is the long-term metaphysical existence? That said, the need to hold on to something tightly, a narrative of what a higher power is, a narrative of who I am, a narrative of what I think I need. It's a shortcut to letting go. I think it's been a while. So Pollan's book is there's shortcuts. There's therapeutic shortcuts. Psychedelics can be such a cheat code because it allows the relaxation of so many tightly held beliefs. So I got sober in New York, most recent time in 2002, Thanksgiving, coming up. And my sponsor gave me a prayer that really allowed me to access what the Buddhists would call beginner's mind. And it's the set-aside prayer. Because my problem is I know everything. And the problem on top of that is I know enough to think that that's accurate. And I don't know enough to realize it's not. God help me set aside everything I think I know. It's not what I know. It's what I think I know. It's not what you don't know that kills you. It's what you know that just ain't so. And so much of what I know, I don't really know that I know that. I think I know it. And letting go of what I think I know so I can have a new experience, and getting back to curiosity rather than the exalted status of knowing shit.
Arrogance.
Yeah, arrogance, hubris. Hubris is just a killer. It's a killer. I've seen it around me. I've swam in some waters with people that are just amazing people. And among those amazing people, the hubris is just comically sad. And I see it in myself, and I don't like that. God help me set aside everything I think I know so I can have a new experience.
And so you think psychedelics have helped you in that quest?
Yeah. Yeah, letting go. Letting go. What choice do you have when you're on the medicine but to let go? If you try to not let go. I mean, the joke in AA, we're kind of people who will be dragged kicking and screaming into new life. Yeah, because we won't let go. Let go or be dragged. Let go or be dragged. I mean, we look at it in a brutal sort of way in AA. But here, when you're on the medicine, you don't really have a choice but to let go. And it gives you this, see what it feels like to actually let go. Oh my God, there's beauty to be had by letting go. And to take that into the next 2 months after a really cool journey or after a difficult journey, to let go and just see what's next. How can I contribute to this thing? How can I apply whatever it is that I'm integrating into this conversation, into this situation?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah, I think it is a very difficult, difficult and almost impossible to not let go whilst under the influence of the medicine. And those who try will suffer as a result.
My gosh, I couldn't imagine. It would be awful.
I think that's often what people call a bad trip. A
Yes.
bad trip is when you've got your fingers in the chair
up.
And not wanting to let go, being afraid of what is to come. I often, before a journey, I often say the step 3 prayer. I offer myself to thee, to do with me, relieve me from the bondage of self. And that's a good way that's a good send-off for me into a journey. And we're getting to almost the end of our interview. So I've got that final question that is, what are you still struggling with or trying to what is that one challenge that you still have in your life and that you are working through with or without the use of plant medicine?
Traditional AA recovery, you start with the resentments, working with the resentments, and you get to my part, and that's the stuff you can work on. And underneath the resentments, you see some expectations, and underneath those expectations, you see fears. And we talk a lot about self-centered fear. And so fear is this underlying thing toward everything. I've got another quality that is at that level, at that core level, and that's shame. Shame of my father, my fathers, my forefathers, my mother, parents, culture, but just shame that's mine, whether I adopted it from someone else or not, whether I was handed it or not. I'm afraid, often because I'm ashamed. And those things work together. Those things tag team. And it keeps me from acting, keeps me from forward. It keeps me from the audacity to step into the light. A friend just died, my sponsee who found PIR, Paul Godwin. And it hit me harder than I ever would have expected. And when someone dies, I ask myself, what quality did that person exemplify that I admire? And from an artistic point of view, how can I steal it? How can I live what that guy had? How can I be for the people around me what that guy was for me? And Paul had an audacity about him. He just went and did. He was a musician. He did projects. He was a man about town. I want to get more audacious. I want to let go of some shame and some fear and say, this is my offering. I'm afraid of hubris. I'm afraid of my pride because I think it's good. But I also want to think it's great. I also want to think it's going to be the thing that's going to change the world. It might be, but it might not be. But I'm just me. And I'm afraid and I'm ashamed. But here it is anyway. And that's what I'm working on. A little bit of audacity, confidence with humility.
Mm-hmm.
With humility. I've always joked that I'm the most humble person that I know, and I have a PR team to get the word out. But I think a lot of my humility, there's a darkness to it that's based in shame and fear. And I'd like to have confidence with humility, not just standing in the wings.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I've got some things to offer. I'm working on a project for this fellowship.
I was going to come to that, but first I want to thank you for answering that question so honestly and courageously. And yes, there is a lot that you are already offering. And I was just going to ask you to tell us about the latest project that you've done for this fellowship. And without spoiling it, I'll let you introduce it.
So I got sober when I was 18, and I came in, and I'm 18 and I'm brilliant, or so I think. And I'm rewriting the big book from the first time I sat in a meeting. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, now I can tell this story better. So fast forward 40 years, I'm in a position with a fellowship who has a fellowship without a program. We're a 12-step fellowship of people from other 12-step program. And when I got here, they had written the steps, just the one-sentence versions, but we didn't have a 12 and 12. We didn't have a book. And I thought, cool, an opportunity for service, something that I can do a brain dump. The first thing that I realized was you can have some asshole with 40 years sober or experience, long-term experience in working the steps, and tell you what you need to hear or what that guy thinks you need to hear. And it might be helpful. But this fellowship is a different animal. And I knew that would be just awful. We have so many different points of view. So I joined a brand new committee to write the 12 and 12. And so we were talking about it. And shortly after the chairperson rolled off and I rolled into the chair position, and we talked every month about, what's what, getting to know each other. And then I realized nobody was writing. And I thought, okay, let me just take a stab at step one. And I just brought it to a meeting. And they liked it. So I finished writing the steps. I'm still working on editing them. I'm sponsoring some people with them, and I'm getting good feedback. The thing about not being just some guy from a traditional addictive side background, AA and NA are pretty darn similar. We have very similar qualities to us that are different from the folks who come from the maybe codependent side, from the ACA side. And before I started writing, I sat for a year just in the rooms hearing what the needs were, the needs of this fellowship. There's a lot of hurt from all over the place, but also from other recovery fellowships. And I wanted to hold space for that. And I also needed the wisdom from ACA. Those people have recovery game depth. And over the years, the people peel off, go over to Al-Anon or ACA, and they find new depths to recovery. And so I hear that in the ACA. And beginning with step one and throughout, there's a lot of through line concepts. But one thing that AA is good at is rigorous honesty. Be rigorously honest. But that could kill you. Because to be rigorously honest about my self-centeredness is one thing, but to hold that in compassion. So I've written from a point of view of compassionate, rigorous honesty. So we go back to my first real journey, compassion. And it's not just compassion. Compassion without honesty can be enabling. Honesty without compassion can kill, can just judge the shit out of you and make you leave. And so many people here have left because of lack of compassion. And what I hope to have written is something that offers both together, not one, not the other, both together. And interestingly enough, there's a group that has decided to start reading it that starts in a couple of hours, I believe.
I believe too. Yes. I have used your step one to sponsor my new sponsees in the fellowship in PIR, and it is beautiful because it has that added dimension of compassion and looking at powerlessness and unmanageability with compassion, not the utter defeat and the military style approach of the original 12 and 12. It is softer but efficient. It's got the message delivered in, and the way you've structured it in very large section or large paragraph allows for the work with the sponsee to take place at their pace. And it's really easy to read in chunks. So I'm looking forward for the book to be fully edited and available for our listener to be able to get it either on the PIR website or Amazon when it's ready. And that takes us to the end of our interview. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wish I had, or any closing comment you have for us?
One of my favorite prayers you mentioned earlier is the third step prayer. In the AA third step prayer, that central clause, relieve me of the bondage of me. As I wrote the steps, there's always the question, where do I parallel, where do I copy, and where do I depart from tradition?
Mm-hmm.
And I kept the idea of a third step prayer, but I rewrote it. And perhaps we could close.
Yes, please.
Here's the third step prayer for PIR as it is today. Great mystery, I release my need to control. May I be led by something deeper than instinct or fear, lined with a presence wiser than my wounded will. May I know I need not walk alone. May I act not just for relief, but in service of healing. May I be shaped in integrity by compassion. May I be used for good.
Amen to that. And thank you very much, Douglas, for all the wonderful work you've done for the fellowship and for spending the last hour with me here. I will say a big thank you and goodbye until next time.
Until next time, thank you.
Psychedelics in Recovery is a peer-led fellowship guided by anonymity, non-endorsement, and mutual respect. Thank you for listening and for placing principles before personalities.